Nancy Morejon comes from a working-class family in Havana, Cuba. Her dad worked at the docks, and her mom was a seamstress. They instilled the value of education while making sure she was aware of social class distinctions. Despite her humble beginnings, Nancy became a key figure in the global literature scene.
Todavía huelo la espuma del mar que me hicieron atravesar. La noche no puedo recordarla, ni el mismo océano podría recordarla.
I had the chance to speak with her during one of her visits to Washington, D.C.
Word choice, I imagine. Are editing, are you trying to find a better word?
Nancy, you are a woman of letters and words. You've been described as a poet, an essayist, a translator. How would you describe yourself? You also speak 3 languages.
Yes, but I will speak here only in one. So my kingdom is a kingdom of words. And of course, those words belong to Spanish language. You know, that every human being has a mother tongue, which is really important. Our mother tongue, my mother tongue was Spanish. And I was talking the other day with some students about the experience of the Hispanic Caribbean. I'm talking about Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. We belong to the largest islands in the region, and at the same time we share the experience of Spanish language. Although there's a difference between written language and spoken language, especially for short storytellers, for novelists. In the case of poets, it's a little bit different. So I have been, writing and publishing since 1962, which means that more or less I have an idea of what creative writing means. I have mainly written poems and essays, that's it. I do trust in inspiration. I do believe that in spite of the importance of having a system, an idea of creative writing, you have to have an inspiration. And in that sense, I truly respect Ernest Hemingway's experience in the sense that he stated to a journalist in Havana that he believed and that he accepted inspiration. But he added, I will always like to receive inspiration while I'm writing. That sentence is very clever. And it seems to say that you have to work, because writing is a work. Even if you write an essay or a poem. But mainly a poem needs inspiration.
Nancy, your poems also dive into the experiences of Afro-Cuban women. Talk to us a little bit about that, your experience, and how you hope that your work contributes to the visibility of this population.
I love a lot the word you chose for the question, which is dive. That I dive into that subject. Because the presence of the sea, it's so important for the Caribbean, we're an archipelago surrounded by, little islands or big islands. And in that sense, I'm always remembering a very deep line by Derek Walcott, the great Nobel Prize in 1992. He was born in St. Lucia, and he said that history is sea for us. We all came through the sea. So if my line dive is because I have this awareness of the sea. Not only as a sightseeing, which is mostly beautiful, but the lifetime experience of those who made the passage, the so-called passage. I'm talking about slavery, about colonial times, and the way, many slaves, African slaves, came from Goree or many other harbors to the Americas. That's a great experience. And I've written about it, especially in my poem, A Black Woman.
I want to read you a line from that poem, Mujer Negra. You highlight the historical struggles of your female ancestors while pointing out their strengths and resilience. If I can read just one stanza. His worship brought me in a public square. I embroidered his worship's coat and bore him a male child. My son had no name, and his worship died at the hands of an impeccable English lord. So you're intersecting race, gender, and class. Can you elaborate about the dynamics of what you brought together in that stanza?
It's very graphic, as you can see. It is not only the rhythm of the lines, it's very graphic, and it's bitter, because it is not the case of raping a woman, not exactly. But at the same time, a reader can think about a sort of rape in the sense that that woman was pregnant by that specific lord, and her son had no name. Can you imagine that? It's a very specific fact through which we explain our identity. And it is a diverse identity, not only for Cuba, but for many other Caribbean islands, specifically to the Hispanic Caribbean, which is my homeland also. So it is sad. There is an anguish in that woman being aware that she is alone, that she has been abandoned, and that she has been pregnant, and that her child has no name. There is the birth of a literature or a creative writing that comes from the past of mothers. In these cases, I love to quote a line, not exactly a line, the journal by Virginia Woolf, the great British writer, who was a great icon of gender in 20th century. She used to say, when a woman writes, there is always the ghost of her mother behind her. A good experience, a bad experience, there's always the history of your mother. And this is so important to our times in which gender is a factor you cannot erase. In your question, you mentioned something which is really important. Gender, race. They are like birds of a feather that fly together, as the refrain says. So the poem in general is a poem that is born of those crossing processes. And that's the contribution, I think, of that poem. It's not the case of Cuba, it is not the case of Brazil, it is not the case of Jamaica or Puerto Rico. It's the whole experience of the passage, the crossing, slavery, and colonial times that still endure and still hits our history.
As a leading voice in Cuban literature, how do you view your responsibility in preserving and sharing Cuban culture, both at home and abroad?
Well, what I think is that you have to work. You have to admit that writing poetry is a job, is a work, which includes to contemplate that sightseeing. That's my job. to look at that, to look at the light, and to reflect it in a poem. And although I believe in inspiration, it's like a mixture, you know. You write, you are inspired, you write a little bit, and then you put that paper in a drawer, you leave it 24 hours, 24 days, and then you come back, you take it out, and then you rewrite. Because words, you know, are like toys, and you go here and there and you move them. And finally, you got your goal or not. Sometimes you don't. But that's the only way. You have to work, you have to reflect. That's very important. And you have to love words, because words are the tools you have for expressing yourself.
Nancy Morejon, thank you for joining us and sharing your time with us.
You're very welcome. I feel very honored with your questions.
Thank you so much.